The conference room smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. I sat through another PowerPoint presentation about quarterly projections, watching my boss drone on about market penetration while I mentally calculated how many hours until I could drive home. 3 days of this corporate nonsense in Minneapolis, and all I wanted was to get back to my wife Jennifer and our quiet suburban life. My phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m. The caller ID showed Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor. "Dean, I'm sorry to wake you, but Jennifer never came home tonight." I sat up in the hotel bed, suddenly wide awake. "What do you mean she never came home?" "Her car's not in the driveway. The lights have been off all evening. I thought maybe she was working late again, but it's past 2 in the morning." "Maybe she's staying at her sister's place," I said, though something cold settled in my stomach. "I don't think so, honey. I saw a strange car in your driveway around 10 yesterday. A beat-up Honda with Minnesota plates." After hanging up, I grabbed my laptop and logged into our home security system. The smart house setup had cost me a fortune last year, but Jennifer insisted we needed the latest technology. Now I was grateful for every camera. I scrolled through the footage, fast-forwarding through empty rooms and silent hallways. Then I saw it. At 6:47 a.m., a man I'd never seen before walked out my front door. He was tall, thin, wearing yesterday's clothes like he'd spent the night. He knew the gate code. He moved through my house like he belonged there. My hands shook as I rewound the footage. The timestamp showed he'd arrived at 9:15 p.m. the previous evening. Jennifer had let him in through the front door. They'd embraced. They'd gone upstairs together. I slammed the laptop shut and stared at the hotel room ceiling. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of working overtime to pay for her law school, supporting her through the bar exam, celebrating every promotion at her firm. And this was how she repaid me. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how stupid I felt. All those late nights at the office, all those weekend conferences, all those times she'd been too tired to talk when I got home. The signs had been there, and I'd ignored every single one. I pulled up the security app on my phone and started taking screenshots. If Jennifer wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 20 years in project management, and the first rule of any successful project was documentation. By morning, I had everything I needed: photos, timestamps, license plate numbers from the street camera. I even managed to get a clear shot of the guy's face when he'd stopped to check his phone under the porch light. The conference ended at noon. I told my boss I had a family emergency and drove home in silence, my mind racing through possibilities. Confrontation, divorce lawyers, public humiliation. All three sounded appealing. I pulled into my driveway at 4:30 p.m. Jennifer's BMW was parked in its usual spot, pristine and perfect, like everything else in her carefully constructed life. Through the kitchen window, I could see her moving around, probably preparing dinner like nothing had happened. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching her. She looked the same as always: blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun, designer blouse, that focused expression she wore when reviewing case files. My wife of 15 years, mother figure to my teenage daughter Amy from my first marriage, respected attorney at one of the city's top law firms. Also, apparently, a cheater. I walked through the front door with my conference bag slung over my shoulder, playing the role of returning husband. "Hey, honey," Jennifer called from the kitchen. "How was Minneapolis?" "Boring as usual," I replied, setting my bag down carefully. Same old presentations about market share and profit margins. She appeared in the doorway, smiling that practiced smile she used with clients. "I made your favorite, pot roast with those little potatoes you like." "Sounds great." I studied her face, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness. Nothing. She was either an incredible actress or completely without conscience. "How was your week?" "Oh, you know how it is. Long hours at the firm. I barely had time to think." The lie came so easily. I wondered how many others she'd told me over the years. Actually, Mrs. Henderson called me last night. She was worried because she didn't see your car in the driveway. Jennifer's smile flickered for just a moment. I worked late Tuesday night, stayed at the office until almost midnight reviewing depositions for the Morrison case. Another lie. I had the security footage proving she'd been home by 9. That's dedication, I said. The Morrison case must be important. Very important. Probably the biggest case of my career. I nodded and headed upstairs to unpack, leaving her in the kitchen with her pot roast and her lies. In our bedroom, I noticed the sheets had been changed. The pillows were arranged differently. Even the air freshener seemed stronger than usual. She'd tried to erase every trace of him. I opened my laptop and reviewed the security footage again, this time taking notes. The man had left through the front door at 6:47 a.m. He'd used our bathroom. I could see him coming out of the guest bath on the first floor. He'd even helped himself to coffee from our kitchen. The arrogance was breathtaking. My phone buzzed with a text from my coworker Mike. Got that info you wanted? License plate traces to Lyle Brennan, 34, currently unemployed. Previous addresses in 3 states. Looks like he moves around a lot. I'd asked Mike to run the plates during my lunch break. He had connections at the DMV through his brother-in-law, Lyle Brennan. Even his name sounded sleazy. Dinner's ready, Jennifer called from downstairs. I closed the laptop and headed down to eat pot roast with my cheating wife, already planning my next move. She thought she was smart, covering her tracks and playing the devoted spouse. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd chosen to betray someone who made a living solving problems. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The pot roast tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to eat and make conversation. Jennifer chatted about her cases, her colleagues, the weather, anything except where she'd really been Tuesday night. Amy called earlier, she said, cutting her meat with surgical precision. She's struggling with calculus again. My daughter was a sophomore at the University of Minnesota, studying business like her old man. She'd been 8 when Jennifer and I married, and Jennifer had stepped into the stepmother role with characteristic efficiency. I'll call her tomorrow, I said. Maybe we can set up a tutoring session when she's home next weekend. That would be wonderful. You know how much she respects your opinion. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jennifer respected my opinion so much she'd invited another man into our bed while I was away on business. After dinner, I retreated to my home office while Jennifer watched her evening news programs. I had work to do. I started with social media. A quick search revealed that Lyle Brennan had profiles on 3 different platforms, all of them public. The guy was either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, probably both. His Facebook showed a pattern of short-term relationships with older, successful women, a real estate agent in Phoenix, a doctor in Denver, a restaurant owner in Seattle, all of them attractive, all of them divorced or separated, all of them with money. Jennifer fit the pattern perfectly. I scrolled through his photos, studying his face. He was handsome in a generic way, the kind of looks that photographed well but wouldn't stand out in a crowd. His posts were full of motivational quotes and gym selfies, the digital equivalent of a peacock spreading its feathers. His Instagram was even more revealing. Photos from expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, vacation destinations. All of them tagged with different women, none of the relationships lasting more than a few months. Lyle Brennan was a professional boyfriend. I dug deeper, cross-referencing his locations with court records and news articles. A pattern emerged. He'd leave each city shortly after his relationship ended, usually around the same time his girlfriend discovered financial irregularities or missing valuables. He was a grifter, and Jennifer was his latest mark. The question was how long it had been going on. I pulled up our bank statements and credit card records, looking for unusual charges or cash withdrawals. Nothing obvious jumped out, but Jennifer was too smart to leave an obvious trail. I opened a new browser window and logged into our cell phone account. Jennifer's call and text logs showed normal patterns for the past few months. Calls to her office, her sister, a few restaurants for reservations. But there was one number that appeared regularly, always during business hours, always brief conversations. I ran the number through a reverse lookup service. It came back to a prepaid phone, no registered owner. Burner phone. Jennifer was using a burner phone to communicate with her boyfriend. The realization hit me like a slap. This wasn't some impulsive affair or moment of weakness. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. She'd bought a separate phone specifically to hide her relationship with Lyle. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. How long had they been together? How much of our marriage had been a lie? How many nights had she come home from working late and slipped into bed beside me, smelling like another man's cologne? My computer chimed with an email notification. The sender was listed as a friend. The message was short. Check the Riverside Motel on Highway 7, room 237, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Someone else knew about Jennifer's affair. Someone who wanted me to know about it. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Jennifer called from the living room. "Just need to pick up some things from the office," I said. "I'll be back in an hour." The Riverside Motel was exactly what I'd expected. A rundown establishment that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The kind of place that existed in the shadows of every American city, serving people who needed privacy for the wrong reasons. I parked across the street and studied the building. Room 237 was on the second floor, facing the parking lot. The curtains were drawn, but I could see light seeping around the edges. A familiar Honda was parked directly below the room. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching and thinking. Part of me wanted to march up those stairs and kick down the door. Part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I'd never seen any of this. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had built a successful career by staying calm under pressure, told me to be patient, gather more information, build a stronger case. I took photos of the Honda's license plate in the motel room, then drove home. Jennifer was in bed when I returned, reading a legal brief and sipping herbal tea. She looked up when I entered the bedroom, her expression perfectly innocent. "Find what you needed at the office?" "Everything I was looking for," I said. She smiled and returned to her reading. I went into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me seemed older than he had that morning, worn down by the weight of betrayal and the burden of knowledge. Tomorrow was Thursday. According to my anonymous tip, Jennifer would be at the Riverside Motel tomorrow night. I intended to be there too. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made everything look depressing. I told Jennifer I was meeting my old college buddy Tom for drinks, a lie that came surprisingly easily. Apparently, deception was contagious. "Don't wait up," I said, kissing her cheek at the front door. "You know how Tom gets when he starts talking about the old days." "Have fun," she replied, already distracted by her phone, probably texting her boyfriend. I drove to the Riverside Motel and parked in the same spot as Tuesday night. Room 237 was dark, but both the Honda and Jennifer's BMW were in the parking lot. I'd spent the day preparing for this moment. My phone was fully charged, with a camera app ready to record video. I'd researched the motel's layout online and identified 2 different escape routes in case things went wrong. Most importantly, I'd made a decision about what I wanted to accomplish. This wasn't about confrontation or dramatic scenes. This was about gathering evidence for the eventual reckoning. At 8:15 p.m., the room light came on. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see movement inside. 2 figures, one of them unmistakably Jennifer. I started recording. At 8:47 p.m., they appeared at the window together. Jennifer was wearing the red dress she'd bought for our anniversary dinner last month. Lyle had his arm around her waist and they were laughing about something. My wife of 15 years. laughing with another man in a cheap motel room, wearing the dress I'd complimented her on just weeks earlier. I recorded everything. At 10:30 p.m., they came outside together. Jennifer looked around nervously before getting into her BMW. Lyle waited until she'd driven away before walking to his Honda. I followed him. Lyle drove to a 24-hour diner on the other side of town, the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to wake the terminally unconscious and pie that had probably been sitting under heat lamps since the Clinton administration. I parked where I could watch him through the windows. He sat alone in a corner booth, typing on his phone with the focused intensity of a man conducting business. Every few minutes, he'd pause to look around the diner, checking faces and exits like someone accustomed to trouble. After an hour, a woman joined him. She was older, maybe 55, well-dressed, but trying too hard to look younger. They talked quietly for 20 minutes, and she handed him an envelope before leaving. Another girlfriend, another mark. Lyle was running multiple cons simultaneously. I followed him back to his apartment, a shabby complex on the wrong side of downtown. The building looked like it had been constructed sometime during the Carter administration and hadn't been updated since, perfect for someone who needed to disappear quickly. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. Jennifer was asleep, or pretending to be. I slipped into bed beside her, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to the public library. I needed to research Lyle Brennan more thoroughly, and I didn't want to leave any digital traces on my home computer. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Lyle had a criminal record stretching back 15 years. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, always targeting women, always managing to avoid serious jail time through plea bargains and legal technicalities. He was a professional predator who'd turned seducing vulnerable women into a career. The most recent case was in Seattle, where he'd convinced a restaurant owner named Patricia Mills to invest her life savings in a fake real estate development. She'd lost everything and had to declare bankruptcy. Patricia Mills had committed herself to a psychiatric facility 6 months after Lyle disappeared with her money. I printed everything and drove home, my hands shaking with rage. Jennifer wasn't just cheating on me. She was involved with a man who destroyed lives for profit. That evening, I confronted her indirectly. "Interesting article in the paper today," I said over dinner, "about romance scams targeting professional women. Apparently, these guys are getting more sophisticated." Jennifer looked up from her salad. "Oh? Yeah, they target successful women in their 30s and 40s. Lawyers, doctors, business executives. They do their research, find out about their finances, then move in for the long con." "That's terrible," Jennifer said, but her voice sounded strained. "The article said the victims usually don't realize what's happening until it's too late. They think they're in love, but they're really just being manipulated by professional criminals." Jennifer set down her fork. "Why are you telling me this?" "Just thought you'd find it interesting, given your legal background. You probably see cases like this at the firm." "Not really," she said quickly. "We don't handle much criminal law." After dinner, I watched her from my office window as she paced around our backyard, talking intensely on her phone. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. She was warning Lyle. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in this situation. Jennifer and her boyfriend thought they were playing me, but they were about to discover that I was several moves ahead of them. I opened my laptop and began planning their destruction. I spent the weekend playing the role of devoted husband while secretly documenting everything. Jennifer's phone calls, her sudden interest in our financial accounts, the way she'd started asking casual questions about my work travel schedule. She was planning something, and I intended to find out what. Monday morning, I drove to work early and called Mike into my office. "I need another favor," I said, closing the door behind him. Mike was one of those guys who'd grown up in the neighborhood, the kind of friend who'd help you move a body without asking questions. We'd known each other since high school, and he'd never let me down. What do you need? I showed him the photos I'd taken at the motel and the information I'd gathered about Lyle. Mike whistled low. Jennifer's cheating on you with this loser? It's worse than that. He's a professional con artist. I think he's planning to steal from her, and she's too infatuated to see it. What do you want me to do? I need you to make some calls. Find out everything you can about Lyle Brennan's current situation, where he's getting money, who he's working with, what his next move might be. Mike nodded grimly. Consider it done. That afternoon, Mike came back with disturbing news. Your boy Lyle has been busy, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. He's got at least 3 different women on the hook right now. Jennifer, a divorced accountant named Susan Parker, and a widow named Margaret Chen, who owns a chain of dry cleaners. 3 women simultaneously? Gets better. He's been using different names with each of them. Jennifer knows him as Lyle Brennan, but he's calling himself Luke Bradley with Susan and Larry Burton with Margaret. I felt sick. How did you find all this out? My cousin works for a private investigation firm. They've been tracking this guy for months on behalf of one of his previous victims. Apparently, he's part of a larger network of romance scammers operating throughout the Midwest. A network? Yeah, they share information about targets, coordinate their activities to avoid overlap, even provide each other with fake references and backgrounds. It's like a criminal franchise. I stared out my office window, watching traffic crawl through the downtown streets. Jennifer wasn't just having an affair. She was being systematically victimized by an organized criminal operation. There's more, Mike continued. According to my cousin, Lyle's been asking questions about Jennifer's financial situation, her salary, her savings, whether she has access to client accounts at her law firm. The implications hit me like a freight train. He's planning to steal from her clients. That's what it looks like. And if he succeeds, Jennifer won't just lose her money. She'll lose her career, her reputation, maybe even face criminal charges. I thought about Jennifer's law firm, one of the most prestigious in the city. They handled millions of dollars in client funds, and Jennifer had access to several high-value accounts as a senior associate. If Lyle convinced her to help him steal from those accounts, she'd be ruined forever. Part of me thought she deserved it. She'd betrayed our marriage and chosen to trust a criminal over her own husband. But another part of me, the part that still remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 15 years ago, couldn't stand by and watch her destroy herself. I made a decision that would change everything. Mike, I need you to set up a meeting with your cousin. I want to hire his investigation firm. To do what? To take down Lyle Brennan and his entire network. That evening, I came home to find Jennifer in the kitchen, cooking dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She was wearing makeup and had changed into a dress that showed off her figure. You look nice, I said. Special occasion? Can't a wife look good for her husband? She replied, but her smile seemed forced. During dinner, she steered the conversation toward my work, asking detailed questions about my travel schedule and upcoming projects. You mentioned a possible conference in Chicago next month, she said. When would that be? Still being finalized, I lied. Probably the 2nd week of November. That's too bad. I was hoping we could take a vacation together, maybe somewhere warm. A vacation sounds great. Where were you thinking? I don't know. Somewhere we could relax and reconnect. She reached across the table and took my hand. I feel like we've been drifting apart lately. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She was planning to steal from her clients and run away with her boyfriend, but she wanted to reconnect with me first. You're right, I said, squeezing her hand. We should definitely plan something special. After dinner, Jennifer excused herself to take a work call. I watched from my office window as she walked around our backyard, gesturing animatedly while talking on her phone. She was coordinating with Lyle, probably finalizing whatever scheme they'd cooked up. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Meeting set for tomorrow at lunch. Bring everything you've got. I looked at the stack of evidence I'd compiled. Photos, financial records, background checks, surveillance notes. It represented weeks of careful investigation and documentation. Tomorrow, I'd hand it all over to professionals who knew how to use it. Jennifer thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to discover how wrong she was. The private investigation office was located in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Mike's cousin Danny turned out to be a former police detective with 20 years of experience and the cynical worldview that came with the job. Romance scams are big business, Danny explained, reviewing my evidence with professional interest. These guys make more money than most legitimate businesses, and they're a lot harder to catch. But you've been tracking this particular network? For 8 months. Lyle Brennan is just one player in a larger organization run by a woman named Catherine Torres. She's based in Las Vegas and coordinates activities across multiple states. Danny showed me a chart mapping the network's operations. It was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. Dozens of fake identities, coordinated social media profiles, even fake business licenses and professional references. How does it work? They target successful women going through life transitions, divorce, career changes, family problems. They use social media and public records to identify vulnerabilities, then craft personas designed to appeal to each specific target. And Jennifer fits their profile? Perfectly. Successful attorney, no children of her own, husband who travels frequently for work. They probably identified her months before Lyle made contact. I thought about the timeline. Jennifer's behavior had started changing around 6 months ago. Subtle things like new clothes, different perfume, unexplained absences. What's their endgame? Usually financial. They build trust over several months, then create a crisis that requires immediate access to large amounts of cash. A fake medical emergency, a bogus investment opportunity, sometimes even a staged kidnapping. And the women just hand over their money? You'd be surprised. When someone thinks they're in love, they'll do anything to help their partner. We've seen victims liquidate retirement accounts, take out second mortgages, even steal from their employers. The room felt cold despite the afternoon sunshine streaming through the windows. What can we do to stop them? That depends on what you want to accomplish. We can gather evidence for criminal prosecution, but that takes months, and the conviction rate is low. These guys are experts at staying just inside the legal boundaries. What about a more direct approach? Danny smiled grimly. Now you're talking my language. He outlined a plan that was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of waiting for Lyle to make his move, we'd force his hand by creating our own crisis. We'll feed him false information about Jennifer's financial situation, make him think there's a bigger prize available than he originally planned. When he takes the bait, we'll have him on multiple felony charges. What kind of false information? A fake inheritance, maybe a settlement from a personal injury case, something that explains a sudden influx of cash and creates urgency. I liked the plan, but I had concerns about Jennifer's involvement. What if she gets caught up in the criminal charges? That's a risk, Danny admitted, but if we do this right, she'll be treated as a victim rather than an accomplice. The key is documenting that she's being manipulated. We spent the next hour working out details. Danny would coordinate with law enforcement to ensure proper evidence handling. I would plant the false information and monitor Jennifer's reaction. One more thing, Danny said as I prepared to leave. You need to be prepared for the possibility that your wife is more involved than you think. Sometimes these romance scam victims become active participants in the criminal activity. Jennifer's not a criminal. Maybe not. But people do surprising things when they think they're in love. That evening, I implemented the first phase of our plan. I left fake financial documents where Jennifer would find them, papers suggesting I'd inherited a substantial sum from a distant relative. Then I waited. Jennifer found the documents the next morning while looking for her car keys. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she read through them, her expression shifting from confusion to excitement. "Dean, what's this about an inheritance?" I feigned embarrassment. I didn't want to mention it until everything was finalized. My great-uncle Robert passed away last month, and apparently he left me some money. How much money? The lawyers are still sorting it out, but it looks like around $300,000. Jennifer's eyes widened. $300,000? I know it's a lot to process. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. When will you receive it? They said within the next 2 weeks. There are some tax issues to resolve first. Jennifer hugged me tightly, and for a moment I almost believed her excitement was genuine. Then I remembered where she'd been Tuesday and Thursday nights. "This is incredible," she said. "We could pay off the mortgage, take that vacation we talked about, maybe even buy a bigger house." Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to make sure everything's legitimate before we make any major decisions. That afternoon, Jennifer called in sick to work. I knew she was meeting with Lyle to discuss this new development. Danny called me that evening with an update. "Your wife took the bait. Our surveillance team observed her meeting with Lyle Brennan at a coffee shop downtown. They talked for 2 hours, and she showed him photographs of the fake inheritance documents." What was his reaction? Very interested. He made several phone calls after she left, probably coordinating with his handlers in Las Vegas. So what happens now? Now we wait for them to make their move. Based on past patterns, they'll probably create some kind of emergency that requires immediate access to the inheritance money. What kind of emergency? Could be anything. Medical crisis, legal trouble, investment opportunity with a tight deadline. The key is creating urgency so the victim doesn't have time to think clearly. I hung up the phone and looked around my house. Our house, the home Jennifer and I had built together over 15 years of marriage. In a few days, it would all be over. Either Jennifer would realize she was being manipulated and come back to me, or she'd choose Lyle and face the consequences. Either way, there was no going back. The emergency came on Friday morning. Jennifer burst into the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., still in her robe, holding her phone with shaking hands. "Dean, something terrible has happened." I looked up from my coffee, trying to appear concerned rather than expectant. "What's wrong?" "It's Lyle. It's my friend from law school. He's been in a car accident in Chicago. He's in the hospital, and he needs emergency surgery." "That's awful. Is he going to be okay?" "The doctors don't know yet, but here's the problem. He doesn't have insurance, and the hospital wants payment up front for the surgery. $50,000. I set down my coffee cup carefully. $50,000? I know it's a lot of money, but he could die without this surgery, and he's been helping me with a legal case. If he doesn't recover, I could lose one of my biggest clients. The lies came so easily now. I wondered if she'd practiced this speech or if deception had become second nature. Jennifer, I understand you want to help your friend, but $50,000 is a significant amount. What about the inheritance money? Couldn't we advance some of that? The inheritance is still tied up in probate. It could be weeks before I have access to those funds. Jennifer's face fell. There has to be something we can do. I pretended to consider our options. Well, I suppose we could take a loan against my retirement account, but that would require both our signatures, and there would be substantial penalties. I'll sign whatever you need. This is truly urgent. Okay, let me make some calls and see what I can arrange. I spent the morning at the bank, ostensibly arranging a loan but actually coordinating with Danny and his team. Everything was in place for Lyle's arrest: surveillance cameras, undercover officers, even a fake hospital in Chicago to maintain the illusion. He's planning to meet Jennifer at 2 p.m. to collect the money, Danny reported. We'll take him down as soon as the transaction is complete. What about Jennifer? She'll be questioned, but based on the evidence we've gathered, she'll probably be treated as a victim. The district attorney is more interested in the larger network than individual cases. I returned home to find Jennifer pacing around the living room, checking her phone every few minutes. Were you able to arrange the loan? Yes, but it wasn't easy. I had to provide extensive documentation and agree to some pretty harsh terms. Thank you, she said, hugging me tightly. You're saving someone's life. The irony was overwhelming. Jennifer thought she was helping her boyfriend steal $50,000 from her husband, but she was actually helping law enforcement dismantle a criminal organization. At 1:30 p.m., Jennifer left the house with a cashier's check for $50,000. I followed at a distance, staying in contact with Danny's surveillance team. The meeting was scheduled for a parking garage downtown, the same location where Lyle had met with other victims, according to police records. Jennifer arrived first, parking on the third level and waiting nervously by her car. Lyle appeared 10 minutes later, looking around carefully before approaching. They talked briefly, and Jennifer handed him the check. That's when everything went wrong. Instead of arresting Lyle immediately, the surveillance team watched as he examined the check, then pulled out his phone and made a call. After a brief conversation, he handed the check back to Jennifer and walked away. What happened? I asked Danny over the radio. He didn't take the bait. Something spooked him. I watched from my position across the street as Jennifer stood alone in the parking garage, holding the check and looking confused. She tried calling Lyle, but he didn't answer. After 20 minutes, she drove home. The check was flagged, Danny explained later. Someone in their network has connections at the bank. They ran the account numbers and discovered it was part of a law enforcement operation. So they know it's a trap? They know something's wrong. Lyle will probably disappear within the next few hours. I felt a crushing sense of failure. We'd come so close to taking down the entire network, and now they were going to slip away. What about Jennifer? That's up to you. She still doesn't know you're aware of the affair. You could confront her directly, or you could wait and see what she does next. I drove home slowly, trying to decide how to handle the situation. Jennifer was sitting at our kitchen table when I arrived, staring at the cashier's check. What happened? I asked. I don't understand. He said there was a problem with the hospital's payment system. They couldn't process the check. Maybe the hospital made a mistake. Maybe. But she looked troubled, like pieces of a puzzle weren't fitting together properly. That evening, Jennifer tried calling Lyle repeatedly. He never answered. She sent text messages that went unread. She even drove to his apartment, but the building manager said he'd moved out that afternoon. Lyle Brennan had vanished. I found Jennifer crying in our bedroom at midnight. Jennifer, what's wrong? She looked up at me with red eyes and a face full of guilt. For a moment, I thought she was going to confess everything. Instead, she said, I think my friend from law school might not be who he claimed to be. What do you mean? I've been trying to reach the hospital in Chicago. They don't have any record of a car accident victim matching his description. I sat down on the bed beside her. Are you saying he lied to you? I think so. I think he was trying to steal our money. The partial confession hung in the air between us. Jennifer was admitting to the financial fraud while hiding the affair. How did you meet this person? I asked gently. Online, through a professional networking site. He said he was a consultant working on cases similar to mine. And you trusted him enough to try to give him $50,000? Jennifer started crying again. I know how it sounds. I know I should have been more careful. But he seemed so genuine, so professional. I put my arm around her, feeling the weight of our broken marriage. Jennifer, is there anything else you need to tell me? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her wrestling with the decision to reveal the full truth. No, she said finally. That's everything. The lie settled between us like a wall. Jennifer had chosen to protect herself rather than save our marriage. I held her while she cried, knowing it would be the last time. The next morning, Jennifer went to work early, probably trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I called Danny and arranged to meet at his office. Lyle Brennan is gone, he reported. Cleaned out his apartment, abandoned his car, probably left the state, but we're not giving up. What do you mean? We've been building a case against the entire network for months. Lyle was just one piece of the puzzle. His disappearance actually helps us. It proves consciousness of guilt and adds to the evidence against Catherine Torres and her operation. So this wasn't a complete failure? Not at all. We gathered valuable intelligence, and we prevented Jennifer from losing $50,000. Plus, we have enough evidence to shut down several other romance scams operating in the region. I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I felt empty. The investigation was successful, but my marriage was over. What happens now? That depends on what you want to do about Jennifer. She committed fraud by lying to you about the purpose of the loan, but she was also a victim of manipulation. The district attorney would probably offer her a plea deal in exchange for testimony against the network. And if I don't press charges? Then she walks away with a hard lesson learned and a marriage that may or may not survive. I drove home through the afternoon traffic, thinking about 15 years of shared history. Jennifer and I had built a life together. This house, our careers, our relationship with Amy, our circle of friends. Was I willing to destroy all of that for revenge? Jennifer was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "We need to talk," she said. I sat down across from her, accepting the glass of wine she offered. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday," she began, "about how close I came to making a terrible mistake." "Go on." "I realize now that I've been vulnerable lately, feeling disconnected from you, from our marriage. This person, this criminal, he took advantage of that vulnerability." It was a carefully crafted speech, designed to acknowledge wrongdoing while minimizing responsibility. "How long were you in contact with him?" I asked. "About 3 months. It started as professional correspondence, but gradually became more personal." "How much more personal?" Jennifer looked down at her wine glass. "We met for coffee a few times. Lunch once or twice. Nothing inappropriate, but I can see now how it created an emotional connection that he exploited." Still lying, still protecting herself. "Jennifer, I need you to be completely honest with me. Was this just about money, or was there more to your relationship with this person?" She met my eyes directly. "It was just about money. He convinced me that he needed help, and I wanted to be a good person. But I never crossed any lines in our marriage." The lie was so bold, so complete, that I almost admired her commitment to it. "I've been thinking too," I said, "about our marriage, about where we went wrong. And? I think we've grown apart over the years. Different interests, different priorities. Maybe this situation is a wake-up call for both of us." Jennifer reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to fix this, Dean. I want us to go back to the way things used to be." "Do you? Or do you want to avoid the consequences of what you've done?" Her grip on my hand tightened. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos I'd taken at the Riverside Motel. Jennifer in her red dress, standing at the window with Lyle's arm around her waist. The color drained from her face. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Since the night I got back from Minneapolis. I've known everything, Jennifer. The affair, the lies, the plan to steal our money. Everything." She let go of my hand and leaned back in her chair. "What are you going to do?" "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "You have 2 choices. You can pack your things and leave tonight, quietly and without drama, or I can call the police and have you arrested for fraud, then file for divorce and make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are." Jennifer stared at me for a long moment. "You'd really do that?" "Try me." She stood up slowly, her wine glass forgotten. "If I leave, what about the house? Our assets?" "You forfeit any claim to marital property. You take your personal belongings and your car, nothing else." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed bitterly. "You cheated on me with a criminal and tried to steal $50,000 from our retirement fund. Fair went out the window months ago. Jennifer walked to the kitchen window and stared out at our backyard. What about Amy? What will you tell her? The truth, that her stepmother made some bad choices and had to face the consequences. She'll hate me. She might, but that's your fault, not mine. Jennifer turned back to face me. And if I choose to fight this, if I hire a lawyer and contest everything, then I release the evidence I've gathered to your law firm, the State Bar Association, and anyone else who might be interested. Your career will be over, and you'll probably face criminal charges. She nodded slowly, understanding the reality of her situation. How long do I have? Tonight. I want you gone before morning. Jennifer walked upstairs without another word. I heard her moving around in our bedroom, opening drawers and closets, packing her life into suitcases. I sat at the kitchen table, finishing my wine and thinking about the future. The house would be quiet without her, but it would also be honest. No more lies, no more deception, no more wondering what was real and what was performance. Amy would be upset, but she was strong and smart. She'd understand eventually. 3 hours later, Jennifer came downstairs with 2 suitcases and her laptop bag. She set her house keys on the kitchen counter and looked at me one last time. For what it's worth, I did love you once. I know, I said. That's what makes this so sad. She walked out the front door and drove away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness. I locked the door behind her and went upstairs to our bedroom. My bedroom now. The closet was half empty, the dresser cleared of her belongings. It looked strange, unbalanced, like a room waiting for someone to move in. I opened the window to let in some fresh air and noticed that the sheets still smelled like her perfume. Tomorrow, I'd change the sheets, rearrange the furniture, maybe even repaint the walls. Tonight, I'd sleep alone in the bed I'd shared with my wife for 15 years, knowing I'd made the right choice but wondering if I'd ever stop feeling empty. Outside, it started to rain.